Hello and welcome to the Healing Stream Reflection. The title for today's post is Christ in the Old Testament. The relationship between the Mosaic Covenant and the New Covenant remains one of the most controversial and difficult topics in theology or the study of God. As the notable American theologian Jonathan Edwards said, there is perhaps no part of divinity attended with so much intricacy, and wherein Orthodox divines do so much differ as starting the precise agreement and difference between the two dispensations of Moses and Christ. There are those who emphasize either discontinuity and continuity, that the problem is solved by oversimplifying it. Most Christians, however, recognize that there are elements of continuity as well as discontinuity. The difficulty arises when we attempt to be more exact. One of the most helpful books for those who are wrestling with the issues involved is the Van Portres, The Shadow of Christ in the Law of Moses, 1991. Dr. Portres is professor of New Testament interpretation at Westminster Theological Seminary in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where he has taught since 1976. In The Shadow of Christ, Dr. Portres looks at the relationship between Old and New Testament, explaining how the Mosaic law looks forward to Jesus Christ and how it fulfilled by him in his person and work. The shadow of Christ in the law of Moses is divided into two major parts. Part 1 is titled Understanding the Different Aspects of the Law, and Part 2 is titled Understanding Specific Penalties of the Law. After a brief introductory chapter on interpreting the Old Testament, the remaining chapters of Part 1 deal with specific issues such as the tabernacle, the sacrifices, the priesthood, the land, and the law, explaining how each prefigures Jesus Christ. The tabernacle, for example, was where God himself dwelled with Israel, as Exodus chapter 25, verse 8 informs us. In various ways, it prefigured Christ's coming to dwell with the people, John 1:14. The Old Testament sacrifices, of course, foreshadowed Christ's once for all sacrifice on the cross, Hebrew 10:1-18. While the Old Testament prefigured Christ's work as our one true high priest, Hebrew 8, the land is a significant aspect of the Mosaic law, so understanding its place in the New Covenant is crucial. Portres explains that the land has symbolic connections in several directions. It is not only a shadow of the new earth, it is a paradigm for the entire present earth regarding the instructions of God found in the law. Portres spends a good amount of time explaining the difficulties of properly interpreting them and offers his own solutions to several typical examples. Part 2 deals at length with various judicial penalties and punishment found in the Mosaic law. Some may find such a discussion off-putting, but the issues are relevant as modern states deal with crime and punishment in their own context. Thus, the Old Testament offers guidelines for modern statutes and for modern states. Such questions rose to the level of controversy in American reform circles in the 1970s and 1980s with the rise of the Reconstructionist movement and theonomy. Portrait faces the relevant issues directing in the chapters of Part 2. In these chapters, Portrait addresses the nature of just penalties for crimes. He specifically deals with questions of justice in relation to crimes involving theft, social issues, and the taking of human life as we see in our cities today, the high violent crime, and above all, the uncertainties that surround human life. He addresses questions concerning deterrence and rehabilitation, and offers a persuasive critique of prisons as a just means of punishment in most criminal cases. In the final chapter of Part 2, Polytrace offers a very helpful explanation of what Matthew teaches regarding the fulfillment of the law by Christ, Matthew 5:17 to 20. The book concludes with 3 appendices. The first addresses the question whether the state should punish false worship. The second is a lengthy critique of theonomy, in particular the version espoused by Greg Basson. The final appendix addresses the meaning of the Greek word translated fulfill in Matthew 5. It is unlikely that any reader will agree with every detail of Portrais exegesis or every detail of the explanation of the Mosaic law. Those who emphasize continuity and those who emphasize discontinuity will both agree at some point, as will most of those who fall somewhere in between. Every reader, however, will be forced to think about the law of God and how it relates to Christian believer. Every believer will be forced to meditate on the law and think about how it reveals Christ. There are few books that will assist readers with these important issues as much as this one will. Beloved, encourage all who love scriptures to be mindful of the fact that it is important to read it and learn from it. And the title is The Shadow of Christ in the Law of Moses. Vince Polytrace. God bless you and have a wonderful day.